Unspoken Issues.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Unspoken Issues podcast. This is an Unspoken Epic coming right at you, and this is one that I picked. That's right, I'm Jesse Starcher, and here with me, as always, talking 90s comics with me, Chris Armstrong. How you doing, buddy?
Doing well, all things considered.
Good, that's good. You are at the mercy of me this time. I'm the one that gets to pick a story and make you read it. Back when we started doing the Unspoken Epics, where we were like, okay, let's talk about a storyline or a series of issues, a story arc that kind of went through 90s comics. Doesn't matter where it's from, just so long as it's a story arc. But it gives us the opportunity to talk multiple issues instead of the single issue format that we usually do. And this was right at the top of my list. Now, it's not because it's like the greatest Image comic story ever told. That's for sure. I just remember this stuck out to me as one of the ones that back in the 90s, when I read it, I really enjoyed. We are going to be talking Spawn, WildC.A.T.s. The title of the story is Devilday. And yeah, I was picking this up back in the 90s. Number one, because I don't know if I assumed that what happened was I got the first issue. By the end of the first issue, as you guys will hear, you will find that there is time travel involved. And if anybody knows anything about old Jesse Starcher, it's that I enjoy time travel.
Right in your wheelhouse.
Right in that wheelhouse, buddy. So I immediately was like, okay, I've got to check this out. Let's see what's going to happen for the rest of the story. So we got a total of 4 issues here. Like I said, this hits in late 95, early 96, and it's bringing together WildC.A.T.s and Spawn in one story. Now, not only that, who wrote this? And that is Alan Moore.
It almost seems like this is kind of like his, I don't want to say he was slumming it, but this is kind of a lull for him because like he was super high in the 80s with, I guess he had Swamp Thing and then Watchmen. And then in the late 90s, he had kind of a resurgence with like Top 10. I guess V for Vendetta was also him in the 80s, but yeah, he had kind of a resurgence with Top 10 and some other stuff like that in the late 90s. But in the middle, he did some stuff for Image. He did like 1963, which I never actually read that in its entirety. A Violator miniseries, right?
Did he write Bad Rock Violator?
It may have been like a Bad Rock Violator. This is stuff that kind of came in the dark times for Chris when I wasn't really getting comics for about a year and a half, 2 years there. So this is stuff I didn't read at the time, and this is my first time reading this miniseries is for this podcast. So
okay, yeah, Violator versus Bad Rock was written by Alan Moore. Did you already mention his run on Supreme? Because that's the other thing.
No, but yeah, that was also in the late 90s. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that hold that in high regard. I was a big fan of Supreme, and I mean, I don't know how many times that I've
#, not my Supreme.
just tattoo that on my forehead right now. I was not happy. So that's okay. That's fine. He's finding his way to Image Comics. They've got an open door. They're like, dude, come on in. And so here comes Spawn, WildC.A.T.s, Devilday. As we get into this, I don't want to save this till last because I'm going to forget it. So I'm just going to say it now. It just didn't come out like it was an Alan Moore book to me. I will tell you that the very beginning and the very end, okay, are ethereal players in this book. The ones outside of that felt very much like an Alan Moore type deal. Mm-hmm. But when we get through the rest of this book, it just...
Right. Not as heady as a lot of his stuff. I wonder if maybe... specifically with this one, maybe with the Violator Bad Rock, if it was maybe Jim Lee or Liefeld or whoever, maybe they pitched him like a story concept and then just kind of let him go from there. Because this is more of a standard, 90s superhero crossover deal.
It really is. It really is.
A lot of shades of like Future Imperfect, especially, and like maybe a little Age of Apocalypse, although I think Age of Apocalypse actually came out before this. That was summer of 95, right? So maybe some of that influenced some of this story stuff as well.
If you were a fan of Alan Moore and you saw something like this, these are two very hot properties at the time. Spawn is definitely a hot property in the 90s. Mm-hmm. WildC.A.T.s are definitely a hot property. Okay, so that's part of the creative team here in regards to this. Now, the other part of this creative team is the penciler, Scott Clark, who I think does a phenomenal job on the book. I had no idea that he actually passed away in February of 2013 because I recognize a lot of his art. In the mid-90s, I'm picking up Image Comics. I'm definitely picking up WildC.A.T.s. I'm picking up Stormwatch. You're going to see his name pop up a lot in a lot of Stormwatch issues. I think he was part of Brightest Day.
one of the last things he did, I believe. Was
Go
he the
ahead, man.
penciler on the Alpha Flight series from the late 90s?
Yep, they've got him listed
That's
as.
what I mostly remember him from.
Just looking at the covers, his art is solid. I've
Mhm.
always thought that he was a representation of Image art for me. So again, solid art for the book. So you got Alan Moore, you got Scott Clark coming together for this thing. It's pretty exciting stuff. So now, you said you weren't picking this up off the shelf. First time reading it. Let's go ahead. I want to give you the opportunity here. Do your best, just as far as the book goes or what you know knowledge-wise. And we did this actually a while back when we did Wildcats number 4. I think it was Wildcats number 4, where we had Youngblood versus the Wildcats. We kind of ran down the characters. I'll give you the character. You tell me what you give me your synopsis of who they are. Just tell us who you think or who these people are. So here we go. Character rundown. These are going to be some of the main players that we have here in Spawn, Wildcats, Devilday. All right. Jacob Marlowe, or Lord M. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, Marlowe, he is a businessman, like he's a little person, and he's like the Professor X of the Wildcats, sort of. He's like the main. He doesn't really get involved in a lot of the action, but he's like the guy that's in charge of the team. He kind of put them together, and he's got the money. He's the money behind the machine and everything.
Okay. All right. How about Spartan, leader of the Wildcats?
Spartan is an android or a synthetic, I guess a synthetic human, maybe they refer to him as at some point. And he's like the leader of the Wildcats field team. Really powerful, but I think he can, if I remember right, he can move his consciousness to other Spartan bodies. I think this might be like Spartan 7 or something like that. I forget the model number, but I think in the first miniseries of the Wildcat series, they mentioned like what model he is and stuff.
That's right. All right. How about Cole Cash, Grifter?
The breakout star of Wildcats.
Yeah.
Kind of a gunslinger, covert ops veteran type. I believe he is not a cherubim, but most of the Wildcats are, they're like an alien race that have been on Earth for thousands of years, and they're like having like a secret war with the Damonites. And I don't think Cole is actually a cherubim. I think he is friends with kind of a running mate of Zealot, who is the female swordsman on the team, and that's how he got involved with the Wildcats.
You mentioned Zealot. Anything else to add about Zealot?
She's like a warrior woman, sort of like, I'm thinking the tribe of like female warriors that she learned under was Dakota.
That's correct. Yeah.
And I think we get some of their another member of that group in this besides just Zealot.
How about Maul?
Maul is another Wildcat member. He's a big giant purple guy who can grow, kind of a giant man style, kind of like if the Hulk and giant man had giant man's powers.
Right.
But the bigger he gets, the dumber he gets. So like he's a really smart, he's like a scientist. And when he's out in the field, in the action, and he's got to use his brute strength and stuff, and he can sometimes get dumbed down because he has to get bigger for whatever challenges arise for the Wildcats and stuff.
Yeah, it's more the bigger he gets, the more Hulk smash he gets.
Yeah,
pretty much. All right, how about Warblade?
Warblade is the Wolverine of the Wildcats, another cherubim, and he's got these like liquid metal hands where his hands can be formed into knives and stabbing weapons, as Arnold would say in T2, which was clearly the inspiration for Warblade.
Right. All right, next up, Voodoo.
Voodoo is the kind of rookie of the Wildcats squad. She's half human, half cherubim. And I'm probably pronouncing cherubim wrong. I don't know how.
That's the way I do it.
You know, I remember watching the Wildcats cartoon, so that's probably where I got my pronunciation from. So I might be all right.
I know how to pronounce Wildcats. And you pronounce that Wildcats.
What a great theme song. It's no Ultra Force theme song, but it's pretty good. But yeah, Voodoo, she has sort of like a psychic powers type thing, kind of a telepathy type thing going. She can identify people who have been possessed by the Damonites because they can possess humans and take over their bodies and stuff. She can like exorcise the Damonites out of people, and she's a former exotic dancer, learning the fight trade as she goes through her Wildcats adventures.
And the last one I have listed here of the Wildcats is Void.
Void. That's a tough one for me to remember the exact details. I believe Void is like a sentience, a cherubim sentience that has taken over the body of a cosmonaut. I can't remember her name. They mention her name in the book.
I want to say it's Adriana.
Right. So she's like super cosmic powered, but she doesn't really do a lot of fighting. She's mostly used as like the team transport. She teleports them in and out where they need to go and stuff like that.
She's definitely got some power. I mean, as we'll find out in this book, my goodness, not only the powers that she has in this book, but I mean, she's the reason Deathmate happens, which.
Right. I was going to mention that too. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
her and Solar.
Right. Her and Solar. Okay. All right. Well, then let's switch gears, talk about another famous character of another famous book, and that is Spawn. What do you got on Spawn?
Spawn. He is a former military guy who was killed in action, although I think later we find out he was betrayed by a fellow soldier by the name of Chapel. Went to hell, made a deal with the devil to come back to Earth, but there was a curse involved with that. So now he's back on Earth with some like hellish powers. I read those early Spawn issues, and then that was pretty much it. After about issue 10, I checked out, and I haven't reread those in about 30 years. So
okay. Well, hey, ladies and gentlemen, he's doing this all off the top of his head. So. There is one thing that I'm going to bring up. From what I remember, he goes back to see his wife, and it's been some time. So it's not like he dies and comes back immediately. Yeah, he goes to see Wanda.
Yeah, I believe it's been like 5 years. He doesn't realize it at first, but once he gets sent back to Earth, 5 years have passed.
Yes. So he goes to see Wanda, and
also he's a rotting flesh beast. So
yeah, it's not. Yeah,
he doesn't look like himself or anything.
He definitely looks like, a zombie of some sort.
Right.
So it's not like he can just go say, "Hey, Wanda, I'm back." He's going to frighten somebody. But one of the things that he sees when he finally peeks in on Wanda and how she's doing. She has, I think, married his best friend. Terry Fitzgerald is his name. And they now have a daughter by the name of Cyan.
Mm-hmm.
So throughout those issues of Spawn that I've read, he has a bit of an affinity for her. Now,
her guardian devil, if you will.
No, look at that wordplay.
Edit it out.
So there's your main characters. There are going to be a few ancillary characters I bring up in the synopsis. After I do the synopsis, we can talk about them. But those are our main players that we're going to be getting here. Do you have anything to say about this before I get into the first issue synopsis?
Just, I was a big WildC.A.T.s fan in the early days of that book, for that initial miniseries and the handful of issues after. Not a big Spawn guy, but this is a book I was kind of looking forward to just because the more mid-90s era WildC.A.T. stuff I can get to that I have never been able to read, that's always a good thing. So.
Okay, well, I'm glad you were excited for it. So we're going to find out what you thought of it at the end. That synopsis is coming up, but first let me talk about Amazon Music. If you're looking for a good platform that can fill those musical needs, Amazon Music has you covered. If you head to getamazonmusic.com/W2M network, you can get a free 30-day trial where you can check out over 70 million songs. That's getamazonmusic.com/W2M network for that free 30-day trial. So Spawn WildC.A.T.s Devilday, written by Alan Moore, penciled by Scott Clark, inked by Sal Regla, lettered by Tom Orzechowski, and colored by Leanne Clark. So our story opens with a very Alan Moore prologue where some entities outside of space and time get bored, for lack of a better word. And for their amusement, one of them decides to drop a very powerful amulet into the Image universe. Snapping to here and now, which is 1996, WildC.A.T. member Voodoo has a vision of the powerful amulet and it shakes her to her core. While the rest of the team try to console her, a caped figure bursts through the ceiling attacking the team. Spawn has got the drop on the WildC.A.T.s. As face Grifter and... That's right, man. Spawn demands to face Grifter and Zealot. And when he finally finds them, he's about to attack, but stops short, asking her if she used to be black, and cannot understand why the Grifter's hair is not gray. While cooler heads prevail, Spawn tells a story of how he was attacked by someone called Grifter and a masked woman named Zealot, saying that the other WildC.A.T.s were depending on them to kill him. However, when Zealot had her chance, she broke down and could not do it. so the two escaped into the night. As the team deny they are responsible for this, the two attackers appear in the building with an amazing story. This Grifter and Zealot are from the year 2015, a future where
far-flung future of 2015.
A future where just months from this date, in 1996, Spawn finds a mysterious talisman and uses it to defeat the Malebolgia. Boy, I know I'm not pronouncing that correctly. The Malebolgia, which is Spawn's master and Lord of Hell, one of the Lords of Hell. He becomes a powerful sorcerer after he does this, called the, oh boy, this is going to be a fun one to say over and over throughout here. He becomes a powerful sorcerer called the Ipsissimus, taking over the world within 6 months. Their mission was to kill Spawn before this happens, but Zealot could not bring herself to do it. So now their plan is to take Spawn and the Wildcats into the future to take the fight to the Ipsissimus and defeat him. And by the end of the issue, Void uses her powers to transport the team to 2015 into a New York City hellscape. So there we go. That is our first issue. We get case of mistaken identity, and then lo and behold, it wasn't really too mistaken, as half the parties were actually involved. But Grifter and Zealot have come back from the past, but clearly it's a different Zealot. So I want to start with this just real quick. Ipsissimus. All right. Yeah. Okay. That feels like a very Alan Moore thing. I'll just say that right now. I don't know where in the world they got that from, but I will tell you that I did type it into the old Google machine. Ipsissimus, and this is directly from Google, like first result. Ipsissimus is quite hard to translate directly from Latin to English. So it's a Latin word. So yeah, I'm probably mispronouncing it. But it is essentially the superlative of self, translating rather approximately to his most selfness or self-est. So I don't know if you've ever felt selfist, but that would mean you're feeling like an Ipsissimus, I guess. But
well, full disclosure, the first 2.5 issues, I was pronouncing it Ipsissimus. And I'm going to continue to refer to him as Ipsissimus.
I like it.
And I was really, like after the first few times I read it, I was like, why did they name him Ipsissimus? Like, that is, I didn't know if it was a real phrase or it can't be an accident that it.
There's too many.
And then I realized into like issue 3, I was like, oh, the P is before the S. So.
Yeah, there's 4 S's in this damn thing, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, I'm doing the same thing you are. I'm like, why? What? It is a very strange word to use, but I guess I know Alan Moore was like, oh yeah, we're calling this person the Ipsissimus. I will tell you that I was like, I looked for Ipsissimus outside of just what the definition was. There was one band from the 60s called Ipsissimus.
Wow.
And lo and behold, they're from Britain. And I found it on YouTube, listened to it, and it was like a blues band kind of. There's also another band called Ipsissimus that dropped a very black metal album in 2011, because I listened to that on Spotify, and yeah, it's with I might even throw just like the first 3 seconds of that song into this podcast, because it just starts out with like 3 or 4 drum beats, and all of a sudden I was like, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, that doesn't surprise me. But anyway, so there we go. We get Ipsissimus and what that actually means in our world. Now, in the Image universe, we get Grifter and Spartan seem to be at odds with each other. Did you pick up on that in this first issue?
I noticed it more when they get to the future, but right. But yeah, they're kind of bickering. I'm not sure if that's something that kind of is spinning out of what was going on in the Wildcats proper or what. Well, I'm kind of wondering, because this seems more like just the crossover on the whole seems a lot more like a Wildcats story that Spawn is just like guest starring in.
Right.
Mostly because he's the villain in the future. So I wonder if this maybe took the place of Wildcats for a few months, or what the deal was with the publishing at this time. I don't know. So, But this seems like just a standard, like this is the Wildcats comic. And I'm assuming Spawn telling this story of him getting attacked previously, that didn't happen in another book previously, that he's just recounting a story that hasn't been seen yet in any other comics. But
right. I got the same impression too. It's like that's just something that specifically happened in the comic. Well, it'd be cool if it happened in an issue of Spawn.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of wondering if, like, in the last issue of WildC.A.T.s, this happened, and now that's why Spawn's showing up or something like that. But
yeah, no.
But if that had been the case, I'm sure there would have been like an editor's note or whatever. But
right, I agree with you. I noticed it more in when they get to the future, the bickering between Grifter and Spartan. You may know better than I do, but I can tell you that I don't recall that being a thing that happened a whole lot in WildC.A.T.s. But it's been a while since I read WildC.A.T.s. Do you remember Grifter and Spartan?
No, that
being
wasn't an element that I really picked up on, and I actually got the absolute WildC.A.T.s, the absolute Jim Lee WildC.A.T.s, whatever. I guess about a year ago, and read that. So it's got the first miniseries, and then I think up to issue like 12 or 13. Plus, it's got that Killer Instinct crossover in there. So that stuff's fairly fresh in a lot of it that I'd never read before, but like the later issues of it. But I don't remember anything like that going on as far as like, I mean, Grifter kind of rubs everybody the wrong way because it's the style of character he is, you know.
Yeah.
But as far as him and Spartan like going button heads, that's not something I really remember from the WildC.A.T.s books.
One of the things that you mentioned was Future Imperfect. I had the opportunity to cover that on my podcast on Source Material with Mark Radulich. And one of the things that drove him up the wall, and I think I may have mentioned this to you before, was future speak. He hated the future speak, like, "Oh, shock you." And,
there's plenty of that in this one.
Yeah. So I'm going to be referring to the Zealot that came. Oh, actually, I'm going to be referring to these teams because we're going to get more WildC.A.T.s as we go forward.
There's a future WildC.A.T.s squad
right.
as well.
So I'm just going to call them the 15 WildC.A.T.s, and then we're going to have 2 Zealots. Because we got 96 Zealot and we got 15 Zealot. Okay. 2 completely separate people, but 15 Zealot is definitely future speaking all over the place.
It's all computer lingo.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, in a way, you know, Moore was on the money that like by 2015, most people were fairly tech savvy by comparison to the 90s. But nobody talks like that. You're absolutely right, though, because, I mean, think about this. And the only reason I started to notice this is being a fan of time travel. You kind of think about that every once in a while. And you're like, man, what would it be like if someone from the past came into the future? What would it be like to hear somebody talk? Then I started to realize how my kids talk. My kids are so influenced by what it's not like their language is evolving. It's more like the language is shortening. I called this the war on syllables at one point because, my kids are running around, and specifically, it's so funny. Technology definitely has a hand in the evolution of the language that I'm hearing because, number one, I guarantee you most of what my kids are saying, that seems odd to me. YouTube. Yes. YouTube and video games. So, I mean, it's been a while that this term's been floating around, probably about a year now, because Among Us blew up. The game Among Us blew up last year. When everybody's sitting at home, Among Us, which is a game that's been around forever and a day. I think it's been around for a few years. All of a sudden, some YouTubers pick it up and it goes off the rails. People, have you heard of this game? Do you know much about it? Okay. All right. Among Us is like the little guys running around that like are wearing suits and have goggles. And it's very much, it's based off of the thing. Basically, there's an imposter. Yeah, there's an imposter that's running around. The whole goal of the whole game is to figure out who is lying, and the imposter goes around killing people. And the rest of the people playing the game has to figure out who the imposter is. So somebody could say, well, that person was over on section B doing this, that, and the other by the laundry, and then the other guy's like, no, I wasn't. That wasn't me. And then everybody votes at some point, like to who the imposter is. And sure enough, a lot of times they get it wrong. They kill a dude that's not supposed to be, that's not the imposter. But anyway, long story short, one of the things that came out of that was have you ever heard anybody say, well, that's kind of sus? Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I have kids. I hear it all the time. I don't know about you. I know, but if you hear,
I don't hear it often, but I see it on Twitter. Okay. I see it on social media. A lot of people saying that.
So that, I think, for my children, all evolved out of them watching people play that game, and somebody be like, oh, that's kind of sus, which is short for suspicious. And then Totes Adorbs. Totes Adorbs is a thing because they decided to just like I said, it's the war on syllables, dude. So anyway, could you imagine somebody from like the 50s coming into 2020? Make it 2019 because you don't want to get in 2020. Just stop at 2019. But somebody coming in and hear somebody go, oh, that's Totes Adorbs. Well, yeah, okay. That is going to be some future speak. So who knows what it's going to be like. And I mean, at this point, when they're writing this story, it's 19 years into the future. And I love the fact they picked 2015, which is the same year that Marty McFly went into the future. And of course, just stuff we talk about and when you talk to somebody, hey, did you Zoom that meeting? Or could you imagine if you had no idea what the hell Zoom was or what the internet was? But yeah, you're right, man. I think the funniest thing, it doesn't happen here, but I want to bring it up now. Like, I think it's issue 3, maybe. She talks about something. Oh, no, it's issue 4. When they get shot back to 1996, she's like, oh, I feel like I got down booted to a Mario Sonic or a game for the Mario Sonic era. And I'm like, well,
that's one of that I picked up on. That was a highlight.
I liked it too. Our Armature is coming. So at the end of the first issue, and I don't know if you saw this or not, but you and I, for some reason, we get to doing these issues and then we start picking things off of the billboards in the back. And we did that with, I think, Morbius. Was it Morbius is coming or something like that? Or, it was a kind of a preview.
Ghost Rider issue, yeah.
There we go. Well, at the end of this first issue, when they arrive in 2015, there is a marquee or billboard that says Armature is coming. Have you ever heard of Armature?
Don't think so.
Okay. So, I want to try and share my screen here real quick. And you tell me if you recognize this dude, I think. Is it showing you?
Oh, yeah.
Do you recognize that?
I've seen that. Yeah, but I don't know. I just know it as an image. I don't know what it is.
I'm the same way. I remember seeing this thing for the longest time.
I probably saw an ad for it in Wizard or something.
Right. Well, if you notice, it's not an Image comic.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the eye up in the signature eye up at the top. But what I will point out is this name right here, Steve Olaf.
Okay.
Now, we talked about Steve Olaf a while back when we jumped into Ollie Optics. We were talking about like one of the first comics that did like digital separations, and we went onto the Wikipedia. Yeah, we went onto the Wikipedia to kind of figure out who that was, and then his name popped up. So, and Steve Olaf, Ollie Optics is the one that did the computer coloring Ollie Optics. So anyway, the point of me bringing that up, long story short, Armature is he's sneaking in a little bit of an ad for his upcoming comic, because that Armature released in 96. So there's a neat little tie-in to stuff that we've talked about before. Yeah. Okay, I'm stepping back. What do you think of this first issue, man?
It gets the job done. It gets everything set up for the story to come. It was kind of jarring to just seeing Spawn in this kind of a setting. Like, for whatever reason, my memories of Spawn are all, that first handful of issues. So he's always kind of by himself. He doesn't. Most of his dialogue, as far as I can remember, was like inner monologue stuff.
Right.
And he was just more of like a presence that kind of floated in and out of the other characters' world. So seeing him like straight up interact with all these other superheroes and all this dialogue that he's got, it just was it would just seem different from the Spawn I remember.
Not used to it.
I liked the appearance when Spawn first shows up. It's like a double page spread where first of all, like when he first shows up and he like punches Spartan, and then Maul immediately like grows like to 3 times his size and grabs a hold of Spawn, and he's holding him like a baby doll, basically. Yeah. So the size difference. And then there's like a 2-page spread where he's leaping out of Maul's grasp and like evading Grifter's gunfire and leaping over Spartan and grabbing a hold of Zealot, like kind of taking on the Wildcats all at once, which was a really cool spread from Scott Clark.
Right. Yeah, I really dig Scott Clark's Spawn. I mean, just looking at it, there's been some really good artists that have done Spawn, and I really like this rendition of him. Did you want to pick a panel out of this issue?
I'll probably go with the first appearance of Spawn, when it's like a full page spread where he's busting through the window, Morbius style.
Yeah. Love it. All right. I'm taking the final page. It's 2-page spread.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, where they arrive in 2015 and they're just looking down the street and like buildings are leaning on each other and they're like Shumagorath is hanging out over here on the side of this on the side of this one building. But yeah, it's in New York
there's
City.
just a body twirling in the breeze, hanging from a lamppost.
Yeah, it's not a good place.
Imps and demons all over the street and in the air and stuff.
It's not looking good for the Wildcats. All right. Well, let's go ahead. We'll get into issue 2 here. So, led by 2015's Grifter and Zealot, the group have to figure out a way to get to their headquarters as quickly as possible, as the demon-filled streets could be a real problem. Unfortunately, they are soon spotted by the demonic Vindicator and Vaporizer, 2 servants to Commissioner Violator. Fighting for their lives, Spawn and the Wildcats cut loose to try and end the fight quickly. When Maul gets too large for his brain to handle, Voodoo is able to calm him down after the fight is over to get him back to normal. The team incapacitates the demons and continues on their way, running into Benito Santini and his squad of Black Razors, friends of the 15 Grifter and Zealot. As they get the bunch to the headquarters, the team meet up with what is left of the Wildcats. An elderly zealot who is now paralyzed from the waist down and has taken the name of Tapestry. Spartan's floating head, who no longer has access to a body to be placed on. I think that's it. Tapestry explains that the others have joined their cause, while Voodoo notices Maul, Warblade, and Void do not have future versions of themselves at the headquarters. Before things are explained, the Troika attacks. Once a trio, now the Troika have been fused into one being by the Ipsissimus. Getting some coordinates from Tapestry, Void is able to teleport them all out of danger into a tunnel well hidden from the Ipsissimus. This is where Warblade and Voodoo find commemorative statues built in their honor, as they have apparently been killed in the fall of the Halo building in 2005. The team regroup and focus on heading to face the Ipsissimus, and on the final page, they see the transformed Chrysler building in the distance, the home of their target. So there is issue 2. We get to look around 2015, not a whole lot, but we do get a little bit of a glimpse of what the future holds for this version of the Wildcats. So what'd you think of our 2015 hellscape here?
Pretty rough pumpkins there for the New York City.
Right.
I had never heard of, I don't think, Vindicator and what was the other one, Vaporizer?
Vaporizer, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I meant to look that up. Are they characters from the standard Spawn issue? Or
they have to be. I remember, like, there was a whole bunch of V's when it came to the obviously we knew about Violator. Vindicator was created alongside the rest of his brothers to serve the Malebolgia, Lord of the 8th Sphere of Hell. He has been one of the more active of the siblings, and his job was to test and then guide potential Hellspawn through the bowels of hell. Vindicator, they say his first appearance was Spawn number 8. So created by Alan Moore. Vaporizer was created by Alan Moore. Okay. Well, so maybe that's what. Maybe he's like, oh, I want to throw these guys in there. Vaporizer. Oh, Vaporizer first showed up in May of 1994, Violator number 1. So in the Violator miniseries. Okay. So
see, I was curious if they were just like made up for this series or what, because I don't recall ever hearing about these 2 characters before.
Yeah,
they're basically just like in charge, I guess, of the city. They're the feet on the ground, boots on the ground for Ipsissimus or whatever.
I love it.
And then not much of a match for Maul, it seems.
No, man. Maul, we don't get the panel, do we? I know he's got his hand, and he is about to rip open one.
Right. He's pulling a King Kong.
Right, dude. It's not looking good for whichever V he's got a hold of there. Fleabiacs, by the way. That's what they are. So they're called Fleabiacs. They're Fleabiac brothers, boy.
Okay.
That is apparently Vindicator, Violator. Let's see what the rest of them are. So, okay, current members of the Fleabiac brothers: Vindicator, Violator, Vandalizer, Vacillator, Vacilator, and Vaporizer. They are the Fleabiac. But yeah,
all more creations.
I think. Let's take a look, see what that says. Creators Todd McFarlane, Alan Moore. That's correct. So let's talk about Santini. Did you know anything about Benito Santini? Ever heard of him at all in the Black Razors?
I knew the term Black Razors, and that I think they might have had their own series, or maybe they just were a team that showed up in Stormwatch or something. But I'm not super familiar with them, other than just the name. I actually thought the Black Razors were like a superhero, like a covert superhero team, kind of like the Wildcats, but I guess they were all just soldiers, maybe.
Okay, so I did a little digging. Headed over to dcfandom.com, dc.fandom.com, and I'll read to you just the first paragraph of this history here. It says, after years of arduous, this is Benito Santini, by the way. After years of arduous training and numerous covert missions, Ben Santini rose to become one of the IO's top operatives, a member of Director of Operation John Lynch's personal Black Razor unit. John Lynch, Team 7, Gen 13. Yeah.
He was kind of all over the Wildstorm stuff, I think.
Right. So anyway, when Wildcats founder Jacob Marlowe put a bullet through Santini's knee during a battle, though, his Black Razor career seemed to be at an end.
Okay, so that happened in the Wildcats mini-series, I assume, because there was a character, he was all armored up, I guess it's the Black Razor armor, and in order to get out of a bind, Marlowe shoots one through the knee and then puts a gun to his head and like has to threaten Lynch to get the team out of whatever predicament they're in. So I guess that was Santini. That I didn't know. I mean, I just assumed that was a character that would never be heard from again. But I guess they brought him back as the leader of the Black Razors. That's cool. We got
this future Santini who's now part of the Wildcats, or at least leading some of the Wildcats along with the Razors. They're pals, at least. We'll say that much. Part of the resistance movement. Yeah, I mean, as far as character goes, he's kind of important to the story because he's getting the resistance together. And when we say resistance, I mean, resistance, it's friends and enemies coming together to try and fight what Spawn has become, the Absissals. I also didn't know much about Tapestry, which Tapestry is the name that Zealot takes on herself, but apparently she was a villain in Wildcats' past. The Tapestry that we know from the current Wildstorm universe, when I say current or Image universe, Zealot was trying to get some help for her daughter, Savant. And she went to a person by the name of Tapestry who has this magic power. So when she does this, what she in turn asks for is that Zealot become her slave for 100 years. So yes, Zealot was enslaved by Tapestry. And I think from what this book is saying, Tapestry and Zealot, either they came to an agreement and Tapestry died and then she inherited the powers, or I think more than likely Zealot probably killed Tapestry. And that might be spelled out in the book. I don't know. But regardless, just know that Tapestry and Zealot were enemies at one point. Now Zealot has taken over Tapestry's powers, and she's a pretty powerful magician. The only problem is her body is, she's paralyzed from the waist down. And she's obviously a lot older now. She's definitely looked like she's battle worn. We'll just put it that way. That's all I had for Tapestry. And then we get our look at Floating Head Spartan, which I'm throwing it out there. It's funny to just see. You see Hadrian in his head just kind of floating around in a bubble,
kind of Futurama style.
All right, dude. So that's kind of all he is. He's just this head that's kind of floating around and helping the team out. He doesn't have a body to go into, and I don't know if it's this issue. I think it is this issue where the Spartan from 1996 is like, "Oh, you must be on your last body," and he's like, "Well, how about you just do this? Remember to watch your butt." And what's funny is, I thought to myself, I wonder if he's actually being literal. Like at some point, the reason why Spartan loses his last body is because he gets shot in the butt somehow and it blows him up. I don't know. But anyway, that's not really all I have for issue 2. Did you have anything you want to say?
I did not realize that Troika was one unit all melded together until they show up again later in the book in like issue 3 or 4. Because they have like a brief appearance here. But yeah, that Troika, they were part of the villain team in the first Wildcats mini. I think they show up in maybe issue 7 or 8 as well later on. Slag is the name of the big lava monster guy, and I don't remember the other characters' names, but it was cool to see them pop up again because I remember them from that initial Wildcats miniseries, and you don't really ever hear much about them anymore. So
yeah,
and probably never will again because I don't think DC's going to be using any of these characters anytime soon.
Right. Yeah, the only one that seems to stick around is Grifter. It seems like that's the only one that seems like they can get some mileage out of. All right. Well, anything else there before we move on to issue 3?
I think that's it.
All right, issue 3. Here we go. As the world prepare for the rebellion against the Ipsissimus, Spawn and the Wildcats of 1996 and 2015 come up with a plan. Now, I actually grabbed these panels, so I wanted to kind of lay out the plan here just real quick as what they're going to do. So Tapestry and both the Zealots, so remember, there's 2015 and 1996 Zealot, accompany Spawn through the storm drains to the dungeon levels of the Chrysler building, or Ipsissimus' lair. Void warps Voodoo, Maul, and 2015 Spartan, bodiless Spartan, to the quarters occupying the midsection of the tower. And our 90s model Spartan, Warblade, and both Grifters go to the stronghold in the upper reaches of the tower. So there's the plan. We got 3 teams that are heading into different parts of the Chrysler Tower. Now, as the 2 Grifters, Warblade and Spartan, make their way into the building, they find they are in a trophy room, but soon come into confrontation with Grunge and Burnout, 2 members of Gen 13 who now pledge their allegiance to the Ipsissimus.
However, guessing Al didn't think much of Gen 13.
That's what I was thinking too. I was like, this is, okay. All right. I'll give them they're using characters from the Wildstorm universe.
Right.
I'll give them that. But to turn them and make them like allies of the Ipsissimus, I was like,
and from what I can tell, no indication that they are doing any of this against their will. It's more well, he won, so we're just going to work for him now.
Right.
That's kind of the impression you get.
Well, to your point though, the battle lasts nothing. I think Grunge grabs a hold of Warblade and you're like, oh, here we go. And then Grunge just he gets shocked or something and then he immediately falls down. And then Burnout gets encased in, I don't know if it's one of Spartan's deals or not Spartan, but maybe it was Spartan. I can't remember. Either way, Burnout can't flame on. So he's done. So my next sentence is they're able to make short work of them and move on. Now, 15 Spartan, 96 Void, Maul, and Voodoo find themselves in a room with the Ipsissimus harem, a group of ladies who used to be superheroes, one of which is a depowered version of Void. When the Troika appears to interrogate the harem, Void is enraged and teleports the Troika outside of the building, which is a bit of a problem for the Troika as they are multiple floors up and they fall to their doom. Now, as Spawn, Tapestry, and both Zealots explore the dungeon levels, they run into a chained up and tortured Jacob Marlowe. And before they can free him, Commissioner Violator and Vandalizer show up. Unleashing a magical blast, Tapestry is able to defeat them and send the rest of the team after Ipsissimus. As the whole team reconvenes outside of Ipsissimus's throne room, they run into a mortally wounded Santini who tells him the Ipsissimus knew about all of their plans this whole time. Not just these teams, but the rebellions around the world, and he's been ready and waiting. As the doors to the throne room open, a gigantic 2015 Maul, chained with a bull ring in his nose, ushers them through. When the team walks through, they find a humongous Ipsissimus, basically a giant Spawn, sitting on his throne, awaiting their arrival. So there we go. That is issue 3. So we already talked about, my first note was our Gen 13 turncoats, Grunge and Burnout. That was, just like you said, it was kind of odd to just see them be like, hey, we're working for him now, and we'll make sure that we take, it's not like, hey, let's help the guys, they're actively trying to stop them.
You would think even if they had been working for Ipsissimus or whatever, that they would, Spartans here, Grifters here, all right, we can help, we'll help them out, we'll take this guy down. But no, also they probably knew they were coming, but given that they knew that they were coming, they didn't put up much of a fight.
No, they didn't. Maybe we could give them that much credit. Maybe they were maybe they're faking it. Maybe we're done. Okay. Now at least if the Ipsissimus wins, it looks like we tried, and if not, then we helped the team out. Maybe, I don't know. But do you have the pages in front of you of Ipsissimus's harem? Care to take a stab at what the ladies that are there? Because I'm pretty sure he took a bunch of former heroes. He made them degraded lady servants.
I'm
Do you
assuming these are
recognize?
all Wildstorm characters. I'm not familiar enough with any of the other teams really to know. I'm sure the Green Girl with no nose is somebody, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure who they're supposed to be.
So, okay,
Other than the Gen 13 Fairchild, but
right. Pales in comparison to what she used to be.
which I think she says she's using her powers somehow to become like super overweight or whatever. So I guess nobody will bother her, but.
Right. Yeah. I think what she's trying to do, well, she said she just continues to stuff her face just so she can
Okay,
look undesirable.
sure.
Our green girl with the no nose, Nautica. There we
Okay.
go. All right. So Nautica. I'm pretty sure that that's Nautica in there.
Gotcha.
I can't pick anybody else out there. I mean,
He
they're
says something about the one with the wrist bracelets, but I don't see a character with wrist bracelets. She's
that one
like,
with
he
the
said, because Maul says that one with the wrist bracelets. She's like Joan Collins or somebody, been around forever.
wrist bracelets. Is that like the really? No, it's not the. Well, that really like skinny one. That one looks scary. Well, I'm sure that's alluding to something.
You know what? I'll bet it's supposed to be Wonder Woman. I'll bet that's what Maul is trying to indicate
You
there.
might be right because been around forever. Yep, I like that. Okay. So my other note was Void dropping Troika from the sky. That was pretty ruthless. She's about had enough, and she just teleports him outside and drops him,
Yeah.
which is great. We got Commissioner Violator who shows up here in this issue. You know, we're waiting we get his brothers, but of course
Finally.
Violator has to show up. We get him showing up, and so this is the point where I can again state that there isn't a whole lot that happens for some of these characters. You're like, holy crap, there's this character, and then within like a panel, dude, they're dead.
Right.
Violator shows up and Tapestry wastes them with her magic powers. There's a lot of that. It feels like there'll be a cool character and then they just kind of disappear.
Right.
2015 Maul, we just talked about him right at the end of this issue, but he's going to have his few moments, but we're going to talk about what happens to him in the next issue, which seems like it's, holy crap, how did that happen? But again, you got a team book and you're only doing 4 issues. It just doesn't feel like it has
you're
enough.
trying to get the cameos in to like let you know that this is the same world the Wildcats came from the past, but like they've got all these warped versions of the characters, but there's not a lot for them to do. Just kind of
Exactly.
let them pop in, let you know the state of things, and then they're back out. So yeah, there's a few things about this third issue. Like I thought it was kind of cool. Like they talk about the different prongs of their attack or whatever. They've got the vampire triads in Chinatown. I'm kind of curious who the people in that picture frame are. You see in that panel, the second panel on the first page, when they mention the vampire triads, they're kind of lighting these candles that are around this framed photo of a guy in sunglasses and some woman. It was interesting when they were talking about vampire triads, and that's like literally we just get one mention in one panel, and I'm like, that's kind of an interesting element. We don't want to explore that any. That's
going back to issue 2. Tapestry is talking to the team and telling them about kind of like the organization that they're doing around the world. I'll read this to you. It says, Delphi and those sisters of the Coda the Ipsissimus hasn't already destroyed are in Brooklyn. They await our signal. Heartless John, the undead ruler of Hong Kong, and his wife, the Blood Queen, pledged their fiercest vampire triads to our cause. You're looking at Heartless John because there's a picture on this computer screen. You know how he has that big jaw?
Yeah.
That's exactly what Heartless John looks like. All right. Anything else on issue 3?
The trophy room that they find, I thought that was really cool. You know, there's basically all the heroes that Pessimus or whatever has defeated. So there's like a Shadowhawk helmet in there. There's some like swords on the wall, and this is one of the only. And I guess there's the head of Malebolgia, I guess is what that is. On the wall, but one of the few times that I'm kind of disappointed with Scott Clark, and I think it's probably more like a time thing. Like when I hear them talk about this trophy room, it makes me think of the Maestro's trophy room in Future Imperfect, like with the Captain America shield and all that stuff. And this is like a far cry from that kind of detail. So you just get a few things here and there, but
could have done a whole lot more than what was actually on here.
Right.
Yeah, it took me through my second read through to realize that was Shadowhawk's helmet. I didn't see that at first. But yeah, I mean, we have no idea who those swords belong to.
Right.
Yeah, they've done a lot more.
The only other thing I really had in this one was the coarse, gross, like language of which character is this with the cigarette?
Oh, Burnout.
Yeah, he's talking about the women. He calls them the perfumed cattle pens.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, I think let's see. I'm going to just read the word balloon. There'll be Fat Cat and those other two worn out sluts giving me their accusing looks. I'm guessing Fat Cat is supposed to be Caitlin Fairchild.
Right.
And it's just like a lot of. It reminds me of stuff like Mark Miller would write in like the late '90s, early 2000s. Just this like really abrasive language. Part of it, I guess, maybe is looking through it through a lens of 2021. Like this kind of stuff wouldn't, even though there's the bad guys, obviously, it's just kind of a gross. And then when you see like all these, just the idea that he's basically the Kingpin Spawn, whatever, has killed all the male heroes, but all the female heroes are his sex slaves now. And it's just like, yeah, that's a little skeezy. I mean, I know he's supposed to be an evil, monstrous demon, but so yeah, that was kind of off-putting, but is pretty in line with the kind of stuff that was in the mid to late 90s in some Image comics. It kind of reminds me of like stuff Warren Ellis, who I like a lot of Warren Ellis stuff, but like Warren Ellis, Grant Morrison, Mark Miller, all those guys kind of have these like weird, they're going for shock value more than anything. Yeah.
Right. The word slut's used twice, if I remember correctly. And yeah, I'm not used to seeing that in my comic book reading. Well, even for 90s Image comics, we're not used to seeing that, really. I don't remember that word coming up a whole lot. Mm-hmm. And you're right, 2020, our 21st century brain looking back at this, it's going to stick out more, which is fine. But, we're obviously trying to better our culture by not using words to describe ladies like that. That's not what we're supposed to do. But again, these are evil dudes. They're going to use that evil type of language because that just makes them that much more of a bad guy, I guess. It's shock value all over. Or why one of the girls in this room, she doesn't have her top on.
Right.
They're all dressed scantily clad. That's typical for a 90s Image book. But regardless, yeah, they're all like his servants. We'll just put it that way.
Right.
All right. Anything else?
Yeah. The last thing, just the final panel, when we finally see Ipsimus or whatever, they break into the chamber and they see like this huge mall, the mall of the future. So he's like, I don't know, what would you say, like 20 feet tall or something?
Yeah, he's gotta be, dude. I mean,
he's the other characters are not even waist high to this mall. And then right on the next page, we see Ipsimus, and he dwarfs the giant mall even. So it's always cool when you can have like a giant villain given that Galactus vibe. I think of that Galactus Fantastic Four cover where all the Avengers and the Fantastic Four are fighting Galactus, and he's the size of a building. And
it's good you brought that up. We get our fate of Jeremy Maul and what his 2015 version is, which is not good. We already know Maul is the powerhouse of the Wildcats.
Right.
All right. And now we have the 2015 Maul, who's completely mindless, this hulking, massive beast, and he's on the side of Ipsissimus. So what can the Wildcats do? So issue 4, the Ipsissimus greets the team. He is able to knock 1996 Maul unconscious and begins to gloat at how the preparation and effort in attempting to take him down were all for nothing. And then he turns a gigantic 2015 Maul loose on Spawn and the Wildcats. Dodging his attack, 2015 Grifter regrettably reaches into his waistband and pulls out, I assume it's a specially made gun, and delivers a bullet right between the eyes of the 15 Maul. Enraged, the Ipsissimus unleashes a bolt of powerful energy at the 2015 Grifter. However, the floating head of Spartan jumps in front and sacrifices himself, saving Grifter from getting killed. Seeing an opportunity, Spawn leaps towards the Ipsissimus and the two battle. So it's Spawn versus Spawn, buddy. How's this going to go? Now, by this time, Spawn has reduced himself to the size of, or at least close to the size of the Wildcats. I think at some point he says, like, it's I can't remember what he says. He says, size doesn't matter much to a god, but here you go. And he kind of brings himself down. But anyway, so Spawn versus Spawn. Now, believing the amulet to be the source of Ipsissimus's power, Spawn grabs it, but soon learns that the Ipsissimus can hold his own, hitting Spawn with a blast. Spawn is out of the fight for a few. The 2015 Zealot then relays to the team they need to get Spawn out of the fight because the Ipsissimus has been aware of their moves this whole time and remembers everything the Spawn is experiencing. The 15 Zealot talks to Tapestry, and she is able to send both her and Spawn back to 1996. So this is the 2015 version of Zealot, not Tapestry, but
right,
the one that was trained. I'm trying to make sure. I know you know. I'm talking about our listeners, because this is the time travel stuff, and the team. One person is actually the same person, but the other person took up the other person's name, and they're still. It's all crazy. But the Zealot, the younger Zealot from 2015, anyway, travels back in time with Spawn to 1996. So, okay, when they arrive, the 2015 Zealot sees that Spawn is holding the amulet in his hands and asks for it. When he denies having it, she reaches and he backhands her. In 2015, the Ipsissimus tells the team he remembers the exact events that are happening right now in 1996. This leads Zealot, Tapestry, Void, and Voodoo to reach back to somehow influence events so that this dark paradox does not come to pass, which is, okay, so just to kind of wrap this in for readers, again, starting with the beginning of the book, these entities drop the medallion in, Spawn gets a hold of it somehow, we didn't know how, now we do. Spawn got it off of his future self, which is crazy, but he got it off of his future self, took it back in time, and now it seems to be affecting him. So these people, Tapestry, Zealot, Void, and Voodoo, are trying to somehow reach backwards in time with their mental powers, I'm guessing, and influence so they can break this cycle, because they do not want the events that are happening now in 2015 to occur. So they got to figure out a way to try and get Spawn to realize that what he is doing is wrong, or somehow to get him away from the amulet. Right. Because that affects him, and that's what leads to these events. So anyway, okay. So they're reaching back there to try and make sure this paradox does not come to pass. When Spawn hits the 2015 Zealot again, her mask comes off. Now remember, this whole time, this younger Zealot from the future has been running around with this mask on. And it's at this point Spawn recognizes the young woman's face underneath. It is that of his widow's daughter, Cyan, a girl. Bum, bum. I need to put those in the script. A girl that Spawn obviously cared for very much. Horrified, Spawn stops his attack and gives Cyan the amulet. In 2015, things begin to change as the Ipsissimus screams. His existence begins to unravel along with the rest of the 2015 WildC.A.T.s team. Recognizing they need to get out of there immediately, Spartan gathers the 96 WildC.A.T.s and port them all back to the past. When they arrive, they watch as Cyan begins to unravel as well. Spawn is devastated as he watches the young woman who was like a daughter to him fade away to nothing. As Voodoo looks for the amulet, it has seemed to have disappeared, retrieved by the beings outside of the universe that put it there in the first place. So, there we go. Our Unspoken Epic, Spawn, WildC.A.T.s. We've reached the end of the 4th issue. I'm going to throw it over to you first. What are your thoughts here, man, as we get into, or as we finish up with this 4th issue?
A pretty solid conclusion. There's a lot of time travel shenanigans, like time loop stuff that doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense, like him taking the amulet so that he can have the amulet in the future and how all that stuff. Even the characters in the book admit, like, it's hard for this stuff to really hard to make sense of how some of this timeline stuff is supposed to shake out. I guess that's the otherworldly characters outside of the Walter universe, which you only see in the first 2 pages of issue 1 and the very last page of issue 4. There's no other mention or side of any of them at any other point.
No. The casual reader, if you're trying to follow this along, I mean, this is definitely, I don't want to say high concept stuff, but I mean, it's something that I could see Alan Moore trying to take a stab at. It's like, this is something that he would want to try to do. And I like the idea of a paradox happening where really it's just something is happening and it's a loop. And one thing doesn't happen without the other thing happening, and vice versa. Like, in order to get here, this had to happen. But in order for this to happen, we had to get there. And it is a really mind-bending kind of concept. And what I think how Alan Moore handles it well is by using those beings outside of the universe. Yeah. Like they are the only ones that, they're the ones that put the medallion in place. And I mean, the way Spawn explains it, or the Ipsissimus, how he explains it is that the amulet doesn't give him power. Or at least I think he said it gave him, he held on to it for sentimental value, and it must have gave him enough power to kill the Malebolgia. And then at that point, he becomes all powerful because he absorbs the Malebolgia's powers at that point. What I don't understand, and maybe this is something that they explained or just expected us to understand, but I didn't like the heel turn, and I'm using a wrestling term there, of Spawn all of a sudden just decides to turn bad after he gets the amulet. So I assume, my assumption, and tell me if this is the way you went with it, but I assume like the amulet has an influence on him, makes him at least powerful enough to where, and it also influences his attitude, because I mean, he like goes back and he's like, oh yeah, I'm all about this. I'm going to take over hell now. And he wasn't like that at first. I mean, he's like, why do I turn into this? And then all of a sudden he embraces it, which, okay, I'm going to fault the story for that, because that didn't seem like it was earned. That just seemed like, oh, wow, I've got an amulet now and I'm a bad guy. And the only thing that I can say is like maybe the amulet influenced his mental state at that point and turned him evil. But that isn't said.
Right. That's how I read it too, is that the thing that set him off on that path is the amulet. It's kind of like the One Ring almost in Lord of the Rings, only much faster acting. And in this issue, like as soon as he has it, he's like, yeah, why shouldn't I kill Malebolgia and take his power? And he's about to kill Zealot,
Yeah. The beings outside of the universe, they put it there, and then when everything's all said and done, they kind of reach in and they pull it back out, and just for their amusement, which is, I mean, that again feels like a very Alan Moore thing to me. It's like, well, these gods are laughing at us. Look at it, look at those silly monkeys down there. We do this and they're doing that. Time travel shenanigans. Comics use that concept a lot. Using time travel well in a comic, I think is kind of tough to do. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that was used well enough here. One of my notes down here, as far as plot goes, like the whole thing behind the Ipsissimus knowing exactly what's going on is the fact that they brought Spawn into the future and he watched everything go down. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, why didn't you guys think of that? Why did you not know that he's going to know everything now? He's going to know everything. You just brought him along. And as Alan Moore's story is, you said it was kind of like a basic 90s kind of tale.
And I said that, but like alternate futures and alternate versions of characters, all that stuff is kind of old hat now. It's I mean, to be honest, it's way overdone at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'll still enjoy it when it's done well, but this is at a point where like Age of Apocalypse, like we said, had just come out like earlier that year. We had Days of Future Past. There had been a few, there had been stories of this ilk, Future Imperfect, but it was kind of still a new thing at this point. We didn't see it a ton. Now,
oh my gosh, man.
Old man Logan had his own series for 3 years or whatever. Like it's everywhere now. You can't get away.
As much as I love it, it is really used a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, my gosh.
I mean, that's the Marvel DC model. I mean, if whatever works, milk it. Just keep churning it out as long as people are going to keep buying it.
But yeah, you could sit there and name off so many stories that involve time travel as an aspect of it.
They did Secret War. Secret Wars. That was like, here's the 47 different alternate universes that we've covered in the last 20 years at Marvel, all in one storyline.
Right. Flashpoint was a perfect example of where they used time travel to bring about a whole alternate reality, and you have freaking Avengers Endgame use time travel. Yeah. As for
pretty much once Age of Apocalypse happened, there had been stories like that before on a smaller scale, but Age of Apocalypse was a huge hit. It was every X-Men title. There were one-shots and stuff, and then that kind of seemed to open the floodgates. So once that happened, you started seeing a lot more of it in the years after that, and it just kind of snowballed.
Right. What do you think of our fight between the Spawns when they finally face off with each other?
It was pretty cool. I would have preferred Giant Epsissimus a little more.
Right.
We didn't see a whole lot of that in action, but a pretty solid conclusion. And I really like I think my panel of the issue for we didn't do them for every issue, but for this one might be the Spawn of the future, you see he's looking at his hand and it's kind of unraveling like a mummy's wraps, kind of being pulled apart. And
Right.
all the other characters sort of fade away as they 96 Spawn, finally comes to his senses or whatever. So.
Right. Yeah. And I will tell you that reveal of 2015 Zealot being Cyan as a young woman, for me, moment of the book, and that's what it was supposed to be. It made me go, oh, I'd forgotten completely about Cyan when I was reading this book again. When that was the reveal, I was like, oh, okay. Well, that to me made sense. And it was heartbreaking. He had to sit there and watch her just kind of unravel and peel away. And she says, it's okay. It's like I was never even here. And that was a good payoff, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was not expecting that. I kind of was trying to put myself in the shoes of somebody buying this book month to month in the mid-90s. I read this over the course of 6 days or whatever, all 4 issues. So somebody reading this month to month back then, we saw the future Grifter and the future Zealot, the future Spartan, but we didn't see any indication about who this new Zealot, the younger Zealot from the future was. Right. So I wonder if people were guessing who's this character? I mean, surely that's going to be somebody. We're seeing Grunge show up. We're seeing all these other characters that are references to Youngblood and stuff. So I wonder if people were putting it together. Well, maybe that's going to be his daughter or whatever. It was just like a huge surprise or whatever. So I was not expecting it. That was kind of cool.
So we mentioned the Grifter Spartan thing that kind of plays itself out in these 4 issues. So if it's not been something that you were seeing prior to, maybe it showed up in later issues of Wildcats, who knows? But I can tell you, if it's a whole cloth thing for this Spartan and Grifter not getting along, that's kind of like this real tiny sub arc that happens in these issues. Like they don't get along, and they're not getting along, and look at the 2 future versions of themselves. They're not getting along, and then Spartan sacrifices himself for Grifter, and Grifter's like, "You are my best friend." It's like, dude, I don't know if I think that was unnecessary, but I guess they needed something to do.
It seemed like he was just thrown in there to create some tension or whatever. Maybe, there was the line when they're in the future and they're bickering, and I think it was future Spartan or maybe it was future Grifter was like, it breaks my heart to see you guys, fighting like this. I don't know. It just seemed like it was kind of thrown in to give a little more meat to the story, but it didn't really go anywhere.
No. I mean, I was thinking well, okay, if this is happening in the book of Wildcats, maybe we could say this is a big resolution to that. And now from here on out, after these events, they'll get along in the Wildcats book. Who knows? What did you have anything else there?
Only other thing I wanted to bring up. So I was reading these online, and because my local shop had issues, I think 2 and 4, and I don't have these issues or whatever myself. So, but there were pages missing from the. Do
not get me started.
Yeah. But you sent me some pages that were missing from your hard copies, and there was a page that has. They're kind of referencing what's happened in the future with the other superheroes and stuff, and there's a shot of some of the superheroes in the trenches, maybe getting led away to some camps, and there's a shot of Dragon's decapitated head on a pike, which hey, always good to see Dragon, even if it's just his decapitated head. And the guys that are being led around by, I guess this is a couple of Violator brothers or whatever. It looks like maybe Majestic. And I guess maybe that's Grunge, but the guy in the front's Wolverine, right? I mean, that's
that's what I was thinking, because I was looking at it too. I was like, who are these dudes? And I don't know if Majestic is around at this point. Let me. We're in 96. We're in 96. Let me see when Majestic first showed up.
Or it could be the guy who Teixeira did the art. Union. Maybe it's Union.
That's exactly who I was going with. I thought it was Union, but let me just take a look here. Image. Because if it's Wildstorm, though, that's the thing. If it's
Union was a Wildstorm book too, I think.
That's what. Oh, was it?
I think so. I'm not certain. But
first appearance of Majestic is June of '94. So yeah, it could very well be.
I think that's pretty much all I had. This was a fun crossover and kind of unique even for the time. You didn't see Spawn teaming up with a lot of other Image characters. You didn't see a whole lot of crossovers between studios. In the very early days, Wildcats showed up, or sorry, Youngblood showed up in Wildcats issue 3. Savage Dragon showed up in a Shadowhawk issue. You got a few things here sprinkled in the early. There was the crossover with Cyberforce and Wildcats, but after those early couple of years, it seemed like most of those studios sort of kept everything in house as far as their characters kind of were all doing their own thing. But this is cool to see Spawn get out there and mix it up with some of the superheroes in the Image universe.
All right. Well, Spawn, Wildcats, Devilday. I had a good time rereading it. I don't know if it held up as well as it did back in the day. I mean, there's, like I said, the payoff was still good where Spawn recognized who Cyan was, and that turned everything around. So the higher concept stuff was pretty neat. What they did with the entities outside meddling in human affairs and. But, and I'm a dude, most of these covers, I don't know if Spawn has his mask off at any point during the book, but on the covers he does. And like his face, I can't remember. And I'm pretty sure this is a continuity thing with the Spawn book, but he's got the shoelace tying his face together. I'll have to double check that, but I don't think you see that inside the book that I can remember. No, I think
it's on a couple of the covers, but not inside the book, I don't think.
Right. But yeah, I'll give, rest in peace, Scott Clark. I think he did a fantastic job in regards to the art. Alan Moore, I mean what more can you say? He's Alan Moore. This isn't a book where I'm going to go around saying, oh my goodness, you guys are sleeping on Devilday.
Yeah, this isn't going to go into the, ultimate Alan Moore DC Library edition.
Well, so we're going to check on out of here. Let's go ahead and do some plugs. This would be a good time to plug a sponsor of the W2M network, and that is Grammarly. For you, the listeners of Unspoken Issues, Grammarly is offering a free download of the Grammarly software. Grammarly's AI-powered products help people communicate more effectively. Grammarly helps you write mistake-free on Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and nearly anywhere else you write on the web. Grammarly corrects hundreds of grammar, punctuation, and spelling mistakes while also catching contextual errors, improving your vocabulary, and suggesting style improvements. To download Grammarly today, go to getgrammarly.com/W2M network. Again, that's getgrammarly.com/W2M network to download Grammarly for free. What in the world do you have to plug, sir? What's going on over there in the podcast realm of Chris Armstrong?
Not a ton. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at BrodyMan34, and you can occasionally find me on Jesse's podcast, Source Material, as well.
All right, very good. Yeah, I do a podcast right here on the Rattleichin Broadcasting Network called Source Material. It's basically a book club for some comics we usually just talk about. It's very similar to what we did here. We grab a story arc, talk about it, have a good time, but it's not just 90s related. We go all over the place. We've been in the 70s. We've been in the 2000s. So yeah, check that out if you have the opportunity. You can follow me at Stiznarchy on Twitter if you do so wish. And absolutely, ladies and gentlemen, make sure to go check out the UnspokenDecade.com. They've got your 90s comics covered. You can find some fantastic articles over there. Also, do not hesitate to check out the Facebook group for Unspoken Decade and the Unspoken Issues podcast Facebook page as well. You can interact with us. Plus, our regular single issue coverage is usually content that is decided upon you in our podcast polls that we put out there. So make sure to watch out for that. Give that a like. We share some stuff. Usually what I do on there, we'll share a poll. And then when I'm doing editing or I'm talking, I throw a bunch of stuff up that I usually see in the comics or some of the fun stuff we talk about. Dean Compton and Derry Waite also hopped in on an Unspoken Epic that'll be popping up here pretty soon, if it hasn't popped up before this one, which was our coverage of the first 3 issues of Amazing Spider-Man that featured Carnage. So we did Amazing Spider-Man 361. Boy, I could be wrong. I want to say 361.
That sounds right.
Yeah, 361, 362, and 363. So we talked about this Cletus Cassidy showing up as Carnage, and we talked about that. So kind of keep an eye out on that. That should be landing either before this podcast airs or shortly thereafter. But all right, well, hey, I'm Jesse Starcher. That's Chris Armstrong. We will catch you next time. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thank you all for joining us. Make sure to give that Radulich in Broadcasting Facebook page a like to stay up on top of all the great podcasts we have to offer. We are at home on Spreaker, but you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and recently we have hit the air on Spotify. Find your favorite podcast platform and type in RADULICH to subscribe for some great content. If you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word. And as always, we appreciate any feedback and look forward to entertaining you again soon.